have to confess before the whole world.
Yes.
That I managed it for 3 weeks.
Okay, well 3 weeks is 3 weeks. I thought you were going to say 3 days. I thought you were going to say...
But I have to say, the first couple of days, Marcel, was like 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Then
Okay.
Easier.
Yep.
And then I got weak.
Okay.
I'm probably a bit of a heaviness at heart,
let me ask you this. Did you do the warm shower part first and then the cold, or did you just go straight in with the cold?
No. I had my normal warm shower first and then the cold shower.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to what Dave says about what he's been experienced, but otherwise, I've been consistent with it. Now, the difference for me is that I have limited myself to not doing it before bed, because I find that if I have a shower before bed, it wakes me up, and then I feel that I can't quite sleep well. But any other time that I have a shower in the day, I will always do the cold shower. I love it. I'm still loving it.
You're a masochist.
Yeah, a little bit. But also because I'm training as well, my body feels really hot. So I find that when I do that, it really cools me down. And actually I feel so much better, because the first few times I did it, I have to say, I was really quite dizzy. My head was sort of spinning, and I was like, oh, blimey, this feels a bit weird. But it was quite nice sort of feeling, which went away after a few minutes. But now I don't get that anymore, and I'm quite happy to have the cold water running on my head, and it just feels great.
What about you, Dave? Did you manage the 30 days or 28 days?
20 minutes?
Just it's not too much of a problem really, but what I noticed was
Has everything come back out again, Dave? Because I know you were worried that everything was going to go in.
Yes, everything retracted all right. But what it was like, like a pinball machine where you stand there and you pull the thing back and the ball goes flying up. Well, that's the issue I've got at the moment.
Right, okay.
But what I was going to say, look, how I actually got used to it to begin with, I turned the light off in the bathroom and I dipped my toe in the toilet bowl first to get used to the cold water.
Nice.
Got rid of the verruca, which, what I didn't realise, got rid of my verruca. That was a wonderful blessing.
Result.
And then I got in the shower tray and it was on, the water was in. So basically you go, and then I don't remember anything after that.
You passed out and fell asleep. Yeah, literally just fell on the floor. Right, good.
It's lovely.
It's lovely.
Yeah. But what I was saying to Bill was, what I noticed was, the side effects, I gained a hairy arse, mate. Now I don't know if it's a natural thing or not. And also on the top of my toes, where's that come from? The hair on that? I've never had that before.
Well, it has to grow somewhere because it's not growing on the top of your head, so it's growing elsewhere.
Well, I think because the water's gone on my head and the hair's gone, well, that for a game of shoulders coming out the top. Now it's coming out the back of my head. Now I've ended up with the backside like Diana Ross. Seriously. It's back combing, there's that much going on, and I've never had that before in my life.
Well, I want to say you're welcome. I'm not sure that's what you're looking for, but I want to say you're welcome. So.
It wasn't what I was looking for, but
right.
It's made my underpants look tight. Look like I've got Kim Kardashian ass now when I put my underpants on.
Well, I'm pleased at least you're filling out your underwear nowadays. I mean, that's good news, right?
So I just have to ask myself, do you do waxing as well for men?
I'm afraid I don't. It does come along. I use tape. I do use taping, and that taping can provide a free waxing service if and when it needs to be removed. So that's the only occasion when I will do waxing, but it's not an official waxing service. So.
Say, what you thinking? I'm just thinking about imagine tape on around your love tackle, and so that comes. You can see everything. You can see your DNA on that sellotape.
You can see your DNA, exactly. We've somewhat deviated from cold showers now into something else entirely.
I was going to say to you, mate, is anybody else in your that's come to you about these hot cold showers, has anyone else had side effects? Not necessarily the same as mine.
No one's had quite as extreme side effects as you. Everyone feels pretty good from them, aside from saying that they hate the idea of them, and then obviously they hate the cold at the time. But most people have said that they've felt a difference when they've done it. So yeah, it's a challenge, but nobody's come with no one's passed out yet. So apart from you, so that's good.
I think what I made you, Marcel, I'm not going to make any more commitments to do it on a daily basis, but maybe from time to time, I think it's probably good for me.
Understandable. I understand.
Circulation. Vicky tried it for a few days, but when you were saying that it boosts testosterone, she got a bit upset when her beard started growing.
Yeah, the facial hair started coming back in. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm sorry.
I was going to go there, I'm glad you did, because I was going to go in there and I thought I'm never going to make the last of this.
Yeah.
So, to put this one to bed and to move on to today's topic, Marcel.
Yes, please.
You're going to answer some questions for us about why bother with rehab.
Yep. So this is a big topic in the sense that fundamentally a lot of my clients who end up coming to me are confused about should they be doing rehab, when do they need rehab, who needs rehab, and why bother doing rehab altogether, hence the question, right? So let me throw the question out to you guys, first of all, because obviously I'm clear with what it is, but what does rehab, in the context of what I do, what do you think rehab is?
Well, I guess for me, it is about, I think of it in terms of recovery from something. Mm-hmm. So you maybe had an injury, for example, and I tend to think of rehab, rightly or wrongly, as, maybe the immediate problem is past. Mm-hmm. I don't know, you break an arm, or you break something in your leg, or you're going for surgery, or had surgery, and the immediate problem's past, but then you have to get everything working again.
Yes. So, and Dave, what do you reckon? I'm fearful to ask, but what do you reckon?
Lying down with a bottle of milk. No, I did this once. I did rehab and to get over my injury with my leg. Mm-hmm. Basically, the guy tied me to the back of his car and drove off with me.
Run, Dave, run!
Yeah, that's good. What he basically said, because he said if you don't run, you're going to get drowned.
Genius.
That was forced rehab.
Forced rehab, and there's a place for it. That clearly worked for you. I'm hoping you're nice and mobile, but normally it's a little bit more gentle than that. So,
the frightening thing was when it went downhill, I actually overtook him.
Well done, very well done. Well, for me, and for what my training has told me, that the definition of rehab is returning a person to a position of physicality that they were at before injury, or what I like to do is push them to beyond their physical ability prior to injury. Okay, so and obviously where that's most relevant is if I work with athletes or people who do a sport. If they do a sport, the goal is always going to be, let's get me back to not just playing how I was, but even maybe better than I was.
Right, okay.
But my agenda is always the same with a person who is a sedentary individual, or a person who the most physical thing they do is maybe go to the supermarket and then go home again. My goal is always going to be to cover the bases of essential life, quality of life stuff. And the problem is that if rehab is not actively encouraged very, very soon after you've healed, or you've healed enough, and that's the other challenging part that we'll talk about, which is when are you ready for it? But if they're not encouraged to do it soon enough, then you leave too long, and what starts to happen is you get what's called compensation, muscle weakness or atrophy, or at worst, you actually get the reoccurrence of injury because your body is just not healed well enough or connected back to where it should be with the limb that has been damaged in the first place. And that's when we talk about something called proprioception, which is a really interesting topic, mostly for me, but it's a very interesting topic that I will address as well.
So, but Marcel, would you say, for example, there's a person who hasn't actually had a specific injury, but is clearly very unfit, very out of form. Would you describe rehab as helping them to get back into some kind of fitness or some kind of form?
Good. Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. Because the process is very similar. So let's say, for example, we have a person who's broken their leg, right? Presumably for a given period of time, that person will be immobile. So they'll be sitting still, lying still, not moving a lot. The general strength will decrease, their coordination will decrease, they might gain a little bit of weight, etc. That person, that same person could present to me, but not having had the broken leg. So that person is unfit, weak, and maybe a little heavier than they should be. And so therefore the process or the intensity of exercise will be at a similar level. There may be some given activities that vary slightly, of course, because it might be that one muscle is much bigger than the other muscle. Let's say if we've broken a leg, that's very, very common where you have muscle atrophy on the affected side. That means muscle shrinkage. So we want that muscle to recuperate and regain and be the same as the unaffected side as quickly as possible. But other than that, yes, absolutely. This could be an individual who just isn't as physically active as they should be, and doing rehab is a very important thing.
Yeah, because, you know, however lazy we might be, we all want to have some level of fitness. Now, I'm not talking about weightlifting and you know, doing hours a day in the gym. I'm talking about feeling well enough and feeling physically fit enough to do the day-to-day things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And fundamentally, that's, and I would actually hasten to add that doing strength work is actually incredibly important. And I've mentioned this before and I remember in one of our previous shows, but strength training, particularly for people over the age of 45, becomes more important, not less important.
Right.
And I know that gyms in particular can be intimidating environments for people to exercise. But it doesn't mean you have to train in a gym. So for that very reason, that's why we've created a studio space where we can do 1-to-1, 1-to-3, 1-to-2, where it's much more intimate, much quieter, much calmer, much safer for you to get the type of training that you might need, but in an environment that isn't intimidating or that doesn't feel dangerous to you or that doesn't feel, and you've got the attention that you need as well. But at the same time, you can also do those things at home on the basis you know a little bit about what you're doing. You can train at home as well. And that's really important because if you can do something that resists your body and crucially causes overload, and I've spoken about overload before, which is where you're stressing your body more than it is used to in a safe and controlled way, that will develop strength over time. And that will protect you in many ways over time as well. So from improving your walking to improving maybe being able to run, maybe being able to carry bags, maybe protecting your back, all types of different things are going to be improved by doing focused strength training.
Yeah, well, we had actually just made the decision to get ourselves a static bicycle.
Okay.
For using at home, because we were feeling really, although we're on the go a lot, but feeling a bit unfit because we found it really hard to fit in regular exercise.
Yep.
So I suppose we are in our own way trying to do our own rehabilitation.
Yeah.
In terms of getting some strength back in the legs, you know, for going out walking.
Yep.
And things like that, and something we can do anytime during the day that you know, we've got 5 or 10 minutes free.
Definitely. And go on, Dave.
No, I was going to say that's a big seller, that static bicycle on the Agrophobia's website, isn't it? We're scared to death of leaving the house. Get a bike in the house.
Much easier that way. Much easier. Don't have to interact with people. But I know that Bill, you do a lot of walking. You do a lot of walking and you do a lot of interacting with people as well, albeit perhaps not by desire. But absolutely. And the thing is, the bike, whilst good, and certainly for cardiovascular, as long as you make the resistance more difficult, it's very important, because you can buy the bike and you can get on the bike, but if you're not getting out of breath, it's not really worth doing unless you're getting out of breath. So you've got to make sure you turn that knob, or you use the dial or the screen to make it more challenging for yourself, because you do have to get out of breath from doing it.
Tell you what, mate, I'm going to tell you two boys once. One of my friends years ago, he bought one of these fitness bags in the house for his wife. And she said she didn't realise that there was a tension screw on the front of it to
adjust it. Yep.
So she put, what she did was she got the poo face, and she put the front of the frame of this bag on the poo face, so it was uphill. And he came home one day and he saw this in the lab. He said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm trying to get it resistant." So she said, "If I go uphill, I'll get fitter, won't I?"
I like that.
Said, "You idiot!" So and he was trying to show him where the handle was on the resistance turner on the front of it to actually tighten it up rather than, so you don't do it like that, you feel.
I love that. That's very sweet, actually. That's very sweet. It's partly his fault for not showing the resistance dial, but anyway, that's very sweet. Okay, well, that's quite a good idea. It might damage the poof, but still, anyway, that the concept is not quite the same as going uphill on a bike, unfortunately.
No, you don't want to damage poof in your lounge.
Don't want to damage poof. Never that. That's never good. But absolutely. So the level of strength in your general life is very, very important, and being able to recover your minimal level of strength is very, very important. And our retired or sedentary lifestyles are very dangerous for our joints and our backs and so on and so forth. So, that's what affects people who are weakened through inactivity. But of course, if you have an injury such as a ligament damage, or you've got a knee surgery, etc., then doing the rehab after surgery is very, very important. But did you know there is actually something called prehab as well?
Yeah, because we've spoken about this, I think, privately before.
Yeah.
Some people that I know that were going in for surgery.
Cool. Yeah, exactly. So this is before you go into surgery. This is called prehab, and this is where you prepare the given body part to be as strong as possible, to be able to heal and recuperate as quickly as possible. So it's also very, very important. And again, not widely encouraged, particularly I would say in Spain. In fact, I don't know of anyone who's had prehab, other than if they've come to me and then they're scheduled for surgery. But I don't think it's part of the health system. And in the UK, it's kind of coming around. In Australia and the US, it's fairly standard, but not really actively encouraged here, unfortunately. But very, very useful, because it just speeds up recovery, like rehab does.
I'm sure it must, Marcel. And I think that, certainly if you're talking about, we have a very, very good health service here in Spain. But I think the kind of things that you're talking about, getting people ready for surgery and what they've got to do, especially if it's, I don't know, if they're having a hip done or a knee done or, something like that, I don't think it's really thought of very much. And then what is available afterwards is, I think, really the bare minimum.
Yeah, and unfortunately in the system, and this is the same in the UK, inside the system there are always limited time. There is always limited time for treatment. So an individual may have an appointment with physiotherapy services, etc. But the common thing I hear is that it's very quick. So if you have 15 minutes to receive some form of therapy, treatment, rehab, whatever it might be, it's simply not enough time. And unfortunately, the therapist is already having to think about the next patient within the 15 minutes that they've got in order to move in. And you're effectively doing what's called churning and burning. So you're just pushing through all of these clients bit by bit, which doesn't permit really for any quality conversation, feedback, action. If it works for people, it's great. If you've got access to it and you want to try it, you've got to make sure you do that. But it isn't always necessarily very successful. So that's where private rehabilitation and therapists obviously can come in extremely handy. So that's what we do.
The thing is, Marcel, I know that you do a lot beyond just the physical therapy, you know, the sort of bashing people around and sorting the muscles out, and you know, you are very much into the sort of whole health experience. But do you think that there is a problem here that, you know, Marcel Salazar, physical therapist, well, you only go to him when you've got a problem?
Yeah, that's often the mindset. And this is what's interesting about the cultural side of it as well. So there are different parts of Europe in particular where the cultural side of going to a therapist is generally treated as when you have a problem.
Yeah.
Whereas there are other parts of Europe, particularly the Scandinavian countries, for example, where they go and do preemptively things. So they might feel the slightest issue, or they are aware that there's an imbalance, or performance is not quite as it was in any regard, whether it be walking or sporting or physical. And they'll think, okay, maybe I should go and see somebody and I could do something about this before it becomes a problem. And that's really a huge difference, because when you do that, you save yourself not just a lot of money probably, but also a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, a lot of issue. If you catch these things in advance and you quite literally prevent them, it makes a massive difference to your quality of life. You don't have to experience pain. You don't have to experience periods of immobility or imbalance or all these types of things. So it's exactly based on what you've said. It's better to go to somebody before. Of course, accidents happen, right? So after you've had an accident, there's nothing you can do. But if you're aware physically, and this is, again, there's a disparity, interestingly, between men and women, and I'm sure you guys can agree with this. Generally speaking, women are much more self-aware of their health and wealth, and so therefore they will preemptively go and get treatment and either be forced into it, force their husbands into it when they realize that they're getting some help that they much need. Or the man will only come along when he's got a serious enough problem that his back literally won't let him walk or talk or breathe or anything like that, and then I have to work on them. But that's more common.
By which point the challenge for you to help to fix things is much greater.
Absolutely, and takes longer. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's exactly right. Whereas if you feel a little niggle, we've all had back pain, we've all felt a little bit of something coming on, we've all felt like, oh, okay, I should probably go and get this looked at, but then life takes over and you ignore it, or the pain subsides a little bit, or you take a painkiller, and that kind of works that time, but it comes back again a bit later on. And so, you know, I get it completely. Sometimes you have pains that you just don't address immediately, but if it's a niggling pain that's been around for more than 3 months, that comes and goes, get it looked at because it's just a matter of time. It's just a ticking time bomb. It really is just something that will come and hit you hard when you're not really ready for it, and then you have to pay for it. So it's tough. That is tough.
Yeah. So you know, welcome back at Bill Anderson. We're coming live from the Costa del Sol with physical therapist Marcel Salazar, who is really asking us the question, why bother with rehab? We've talked about some interesting things, and I'm talking about regarding rehab, Marcel.
Yeah.
So, you're going to talk us through different types of rehab.
Yeah. So the most common one, and probably the type of rehab that I deal with on a most common basis, is going to be physical or musculoskeletal. And that covers a very large area of rehab. So if we're talking about a person that has had a knee surgery, okay, very, very common procedure, knee or hip surgery. Hip surgery is even more common, actually. That's something I'm going to be entering into a rehab program with a hip replacement client in the next week or so, once he gets cleared by his surgeon, which is great news. And what that's going to involve is it's going to involve identifying firstly what his range of movement is, okay? So that quite logically sounds like it is how much movement can we put through his hip that is both safe and comfortable.
Right.
Then what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to identify what level of strength he has, either in that leg as well, and leg and hip, as well as the opposing leg and hip. And then we're going to evaluate what type of activities can he be doing on a daily basis in order to accelerate his rate of healing and recuperation and strength and physical abilities. So that's what's going to be my primary focus when and if I work with, for example, a hip replacement client. And then over time, what we do is we measure the range of motion, and that is increasing. We measure his general strength in the localized areas and the rest of his body over time. And then we measure what are his physical abilities. So right now, going out to the shop is not an option.
Right.
But in time, and as soon as possible, we want to be able to make sure that he can get down his stairs, get out the door, safely proceed to a local store, and come back and repeat that action, but in reverse, without any given problems. And that is a lifestyle and well-being priority that is accelerated exponentially when you get rehab support from somebody. That hopefully would be something that would happen anyway, but the risks are much higher and the speed of a recovery is usually a bit slower if you do it by yourself. Doesn't mean you're not going to, but if you get help, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, and let's be honest, if a person has had a hip problem, which has reached the stage where they need to be operated, surely the chances are that their mobility up to that point has been deteriorating.
Correct.
Anyway.
Correct. So this individual is a perfect example of prehab. So I was working with him right up until 3 days before his surgery. And our goal was to maintain as much movement through the joint as it would allow, but it had reduced down to around 25% of the movement of your hip. So if you can imagine what 25% of movement of your hip is, that's limited walking, that's a limited ability to sit down, you can just about get up steps, things like that. And I had been working with him for a while to delay the process of surgery for as long as humanly possible, but at the same time, actively encouraging him to pursue that because we knew that it wasn't getting any better. His hip required surgery, and the longer it went on, unchanged, the more his life was going to be affected. And luckily we started the ball rolling, and it's actually his surgery date got cancelled 3 times, which is quite impressive really, but it got cancelled 3 times in a row before it did actually eventually finally happen. So getting recuperation and doing the prehab allowed us to maintain the muscle mass in his leg and his bum, very important. And it allowed us to maintain the integrity of his knees. His knees are also a bit of a problem. So we had to maintain and keep them strong, but they were also a problem with a lot of history. His upper body is absolutely fine, apart from one slightly dodgy shoulder. So, I mean, there's a lot going on. So if we can keep him as active and mobile as possible, his return to normality is going to be that much faster. Whereas if we just leave him, everything's just going to get tighter and worse and more effective, and obviously his general well-being will be bad. And so as soon as he gets the green light from the surgeon and his surgical site has healed appropriately, which what needs to happen, of course, then we can start getting back to work on his movement, range of motion, general strength, pain, all that type of stuff. And that's exactly what we're going to work on. And of course, that does also lead into neurological as well. So one of the other areas of rehab is neurological rehab. And that's where I've worked with people who are victims of stroke.
Right, okay.
So stroke victims, it's not a great situation to obviously suffer from a stroke. And there are different levels of stroke victims. And so that can affect you mildly, or it can affect you aggressively, whereby, as we know, one side of your body can be completely affected by a brain shutdown, effectively. And what we can do is it's a slower process for sure, because anything related to the nervous system, particularly if there is necrosis, which is death of the nervous system or nerve endings, etc., particularly in certain parts of your brain, it can result in at worst non-return, but at best slow recovery.
Okay.
And it is doable. It is doable, and I've been so proud of one client in particular who did suffer a stroke, and we got him from being wheelchair bound and unable to speak to speaking and being able to walk for short periods of time, such as being able to go to the loo, have a shower. It wasn't a possibility to walk down to the shops. He was wheelchair based, but he was able to stand load bear on one side because he lost that ability altogether, and completely contracted all on one side, so everything's curled up, so one arm is tight, one leg is tight, squeezed up to the body. So it's very unfortunate, it's very debilitating, it's very difficult for a partner, but if you get rehabilitation, it can make huge differences to your lifestyle once you start to open out the body, retrain the nervous system, relax the muscles as best they can, and that form of rehab and physical therapy is incredible, and makes a big difference. And people can absolutely recover their lives by doing that type of things. But at the same time, if you don't do it, then very little changes, and you can have a very limited lifestyle.
Yeah. So you're saying, Marcel, that in the case of stroke, for example, if there is permanent damage to the brain, there's going to be some kind of limitations on how far a person can recover their mobility, for example.
Correct. So that identifying limitations early on is crucial, but people have defied medical belief many a time. So there are times when your doctor, and actually the medical doctor who was dealing with my client said to him, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to walk again. But we got him up on his feet and we got it walking. So, it took time, it took a lot of effort, it was hard work from his part. And we had a few setbacks as well, and these things will happen, but it was doable, but it's hard work, and it has to be done on a daily basis in that regard, because you have to effectively rebuild these connections and rebuild that strength. So it can be very difficult to recuperate, and there are limitations very often. You have to manage your expectations, but there are some crazy changes that you can make as well with hard work and consistency as well.
So would you say that even with strokes, even a fairly severe stroke,
yep,
that there is some degree of improvement that can be achieved with the right kind of exercise? Absolutely, 100%. And there are places in the world where individuals who have suffered or are victims of stroke will seek out and go to, because the mainstream or the people they have access to might be like, well, there's nothing we can do, this is where you're at. But there are professional centers or individuals who have experience that will go against that and will continue to work with those individuals and make huge headways. And there are centers around the world where you can do that as well, or individuals who you can work with. So yeah, absolutely.
What I was going to ask you, Marcel, can you do therapy online? Virtual therapy?
It's a good question. That's a good question. It depends what it is. That's a really good question. So yes, I can, but there are limitations, which is why I try not to encourage it too much. When it's exercise based, definitely, because I can guide you through, talk you through, demonstrate, video calling, all of this is totally doable. But obviously when it comes to the manual stuff where I need to feel what's happening in your body, or perhaps I need to support you in some way, which is something that I do because I'm very much a hands-on therapist as well. There are limitations to what I can do, but 100% there are certain things that I can, certainly consultations can be done online, exercise revisions, guidance, a bit like personal training, if you will. That can all be done online, absolutely. But there are elements as well that just simply can't, quite simply.
It's what I was thinking. My uncle, bless him, is an ex-Manchester United player. He's got problems with his knees. He's had both knees replaced.
Oh, wow.
And he's gone back to the doctor, and the doctor says, yeah, after 7 years, this is why you're having issues. You mean? You never told me that when I was having it done, that there's going to be issues after 7 years.
Yep.
So I'm thinking if when you come back on, if we get in touch with him, we get him in touch with you.
Okay.
We bring him on board as a client.
Okay.
And then we follow how you actually can.
Interesting. Yeah, why not? Why not? I mean, the one thing that we would have to find out, which would be interesting in relation to that, would be what the doctor's talking about is the wear and tear of the knees.
Yeah.
So this is, think of it like a pair of tires, right? I mean, our feet, our body, our joints, they are genius materials that were supposed to last for a lifetime. But there are variables that can exist that will degenerate or degrade them or whatever. So if you replace that given part with a man-made product, like a tire on a car, it's only going to last so long. Yeah. We haven't yet developed hardware, if you will, that replicates the quality of our own joints and our own tissue and that kind of stuff. This is where stem cell technology becomes very, very interesting, because the ability to heal and to repair yourself using stem cell tech is really interesting. But we're not there yet either, and there's a lot of moral and legal issues related to that. But in terms of your granddad, did you say?
No, my uncle.
Oh, your uncle, sorry, your uncle. His knees, absolutely, there's always a time frame. Normally the surgeons mention, this is why they want to wait as long as possible in a person's life before they replace anything significant, because there is a lifetime for the replaced part. So yeah, absolutely. But if that's not necessarily the problem, it could be, and you will need to find this out, but it could be that there are issues around the joint that are giving your uncle jip that we absolutely could work on. Because if the tissue is not happy in some regard, it could be that it's very tight. And I've experienced this very recently, actually, with individuals who suffer from knee pain, but it's not just necessarily inside the knee, it's around the knee, and they've got so much tightness they can barely walk. And when we ease that off, that soft tissue changes the whole life. The whole experience changes altogether. It's amazing.
Well, I'm just thinking, if Bill's all right with doing that, I'm just thinking if we have like a process of you actually, having him as a client, and we see the process of how he can get over this, and through what you're doing with him, I think it would be.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be interesting to have a running workout or running rehabilitation or therapy. That would be very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Let's give that a go. Absolutely.
Yeah, but get in touch with him, and I'll threaten him that he's going to have.
Where does he live? He lives in the UK or he lives in France?
Yeah, he's near Manchester Airport.
Oh, he's still in Manchester. Okay.
So,
cool.
He's a nightmare. He's sorted out so many golf events and charity dues, but his knees are that bad at the moment. It takes forever for him to get to the phone. So my auntie all the time now answered the phone, and then I said, "Has your house got bigger?" Because it's like, remember Trumpton and Chigley, where the butler used the phone to go, and then they'd walk down the corridor, you'd see them go the music. Like that, because it'd take forever to get to the phone.
Really long corridors. Yeah, really long corridors.
He's in a mess with it. It's just wear and tear with his knees with football over the years.
Yeah.
I think I might have issues when I get older, but I mean, I'm just thinking years ago, the weight of the balls and the boots that you wore, I don't know if those were, a reason for the injuries that the guys have.
I mean, there's a reason why. For example, footballers nowadays, of course, with an injury, they'll suffer knee problems, lower limb issues, all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, we know that footballers, their careers are lasting much longer, aren't they?
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because they get rehab. It's because their nutrition is well maintained. It's because they do the right type of strength and or stretching on a regular basis, and that maintains their bodies. They all get physical therapy. All the professionals, all the top clubs, we all know they have physios. Of course, back in the day, the task of the physio was to replace the cigarette in the mouth of the player and maybe give them a squeeze of orange juice to go with it. So, that was, the physio came running on, and it wasn't the spray that they use nowadays, it was a plume of cigarette smoke. And that's what they, come on son, run it off, you'll be fine. And so, that kind of...
I always remember one of my managers, actually, Bill Beattie. He was the chief scout for Dundee United. And he just said to me, Dave, run at the number 2. He said, he can't breathe. He said, just scare him to death. Just get the ball and run at him. And this lad was enormous, but he was smoking at the side of the pitch before kickoff. And
Love it.
You can have an heart attack. I'm going to kill you.
Absolutely.
But I mean, like you were saying there, I finished playing, 3 years ago, and I'm 54 now. And I only finished playing 3 years ago. So it's how you maintain your body and how you look at it. I've always been careful of what I've done and always been active and done the right things. But,
interesting.
It's interesting to see certain players, even professionals, that as soon as they retire, it's like...
straight downhill.
Brian McClare from Manchester United. Now, if you saw him, he's an after-dinner speaker. You'd never know in a month of Sundays it was him.
Right.
Because he's got a massive stomach, he's got a beard, he's got a lot of hair.
Yeah.
He just looks unhealthy. You think, are you going to die?
Yeah.
But you saw him 15 years earlier, and you think, professional footballer, not a problem.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. He played football probably because he bloody loved it. He wasn't playing because it kept him healthy, it kept him fit. He did nutrition, he did therapy, all that kind of stuff. He just loved football. So, if he played it for as long as he could and he had a skill, but if you don't have the mindset as well of prevention and, learning about new nutrition, because of course, if you're not running around a pitch 4 or 5 times a week for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, you're burning an awful lot of calories. If you're not doing that anymore, you're just consuming lots of food and then you're just getting fat. So, the whole lifestyle changes when that happens. And the same thing if you injure yourself. If you injure yourself and you're not getting enough guidance, sometimes as we said before, you gain weight because you're still eating the same, but you're not necessarily consuming the calories in the same way. Your lifestyle is different, so you might have to rest with bed rest and so on and so forth. So it doesn't mean that you should starve yourself, definitely not. Because it's very important that you do continue to eat if you've got an injury and you have to be in bed. But it's what you're putting into your body that becomes more important. And that actually brings me onto a topic in relation to the food inside hospitals. Because the most stressful thing for me is to see the quality of food inside, or I say quality very loosely, of food inside hospitals, because it's so important what you give people who are healing and recuperating. That's their refueling juice. And if the quality isn't very good, you're really not facilitating the process of healing. But that's another show. So yeah, that becomes very, very important in any form of recovery, rehab, prehab, etc. So just fueling your body as best you can to facilitate healing is fundamental, absolutely fundamental.
We've got just a few minutes left, Marcel.
Yeah.
You picked up on the sort of prehab and preparing people for surgery and then helping them afterwards.
Yeah.
And also neurological. Is there another form?
There are other forms of rehab such as speech therapy and so on, but that's not necessarily my specialty. But then what we would then do is look to take to performance rehab. So where we've spoken about somebody who's either had a stroke or somebody who's had an accident that is maybe sedentary, if we have an athlete, for example, or a paddle player, tennis player, golfer, things like that, what we'll always look to try to do is make that person stronger than when they were before they injured or before they had any issue, to make their performance better. And that's really what the goal of any physical therapist, strength and conditioning coach, which is what I was trained in many moons ago. That's why I would try and combine those types of things to make the person's ability to perform better and better, despite the fact that they may have injured themselves. And that's also the same with Premier League football. I mean, I think of David Beckham and his rehab. I followed that quite closely when he broke a toe, I think, and they had him bouncing on.
That was when he did his metatarsal before the World Cup.
That's it. I remember that. And I was in London, and they were watching because they were keeping it really closely guarded in terms of showing him, because they didn't want to show that he was weak.
Rooney did exactly the same thing as well before the World Cup, didn't he? Rooney did.
That's it. And it's so easy to do. I mean, you could stub it on a bed, or you could kick a ball wrong, or you can get stamped on, or whatever. But I remember his rehab being bouncing on a trampoline, which is difficult for most people. Bouncing on a trampoline with one foot is quite challenging for most people. I saw Beckham doing that whilst kicking a ball. So he was doing keepy-uppy whilst bouncing on a trampoline with one leg. Now that's rehab. That's proper skill-based rehab.
Victoria thought that was foreplay. She was under starters orders at that point.
Oh, don't like to think about that. But anyway, that's fine. Yeah, so that is, yeah.
So, Marcel,
yes.
Time is beating us.
Yes.
Again. Would you like to just give people your website?
Yes, absolutely.
Follow up.
100%. Yeah, you'll find me on strongforlife.me or strongforlife.es if you want the Spanish version, that's no problem. You'll also find me on Facebook and Instagram with strongforlife.me. So if you put facebook.com, strongforlife.me, you'll find me / of course, after the .com of Facebook or Instagram. And you'll also find me on Google, where you'll see all my reviews and recommendations. So if you want to check me out, definitely make sure you check out what it is that I do. And we're here based in the fantastic Calahonda Calypso area as well. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for coming back, Marcel. You come back in a month's time again.
I'll be here. I'll be here.
New topic for us. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who's been listening in today. Have a fantastic weekend. And I will be back next Friday at 1 o'clock. Take care, everyone.
Brilliant. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you very, very soon in the next one. If you're watching this on replay, just let me know what your thoughts are and whether you got some value from this as well. Take care. Bye-bye for now.